Welcome back, everyone. So in our last video, we explored how Flowise Agentflow V2 now allows us to orchestrate simple and advanced sequences and use LLMs across our entire business logic stack. So today, we're taking that same agentic foundation and applying it to a new real-world challenge, which is to design the initial proof of concept for a multi-agent Slack announcements team, where we will look at blending human oversight and agentic reasoning to essentially help us all do better work. So I decided to initially work with Slack because it's still the main professional comms platform for a lot of teams, and automating routine messages, announcements, and then even doing all the personalized outreach can be a lot of work. So we will build the initial starter kit, and it can be expanded to include more messaging platforms like Discord and WhatsApp, or anything that has an accessible API, really. So I've also been recently paying a lot of attention to all the latest research and community discussions around the topic of AI replacing things. Well, ultimately, though, I think the real future of all this stuff isn't about replacement. Instead, it's all about augmentation and selective autonomy. So staying in the loop when we need to, and allowing agentic structures to do their thing when we don't. And while I personally will still be using many legacy chatflow tool agents, as AI and agentics grow and mature, we do need to have a much more feature-rich developer toolkit, so that we as applied AI engineers can handle the growing amount of complexity and edge cases that need to be covered. And that is one of the reasons why human in the loop is now becoming a gold standard for trustworthy, controllable AI. And it just so happens to be one of the core design principles in Flowise Agentflow V2. All right, so this tutorial will walk us through building the beginnings of this Slack channel management system using the latest features. We'll leverage the new node architecture with a special focus on this human-in-the-loop review, and then an LLM-powered intent understanding process that then feeds us all into a Slack MCP server that is available to us directly in Flowise. And if you've seen the recent Flowise docs, and the Discord server discussions, and maybe GitHub release notes, or even just the first video in this series, you'll know just how much flexibility and control this new baby has. So let's now enter into the agentic flow and get some node engineering done. All right, so first of all, let's break this down and take a look at what we will be creating today, with some additional context from the most recent Flowise docs, and other initial core aspects of how this whole new architecture is supposed to truly empower us. So, we enter the flow with a user's message and use the start node. Then, we utilize an LLM node, which processes and rewrites this message. And in more advanced builds, you can immediately start this off with a tool agent and have it do some deep research and maybe query RAG banks or just custom tool calls. But for our initial purpose of getting comfortable and observing the signal flow and layout, we'll go with a non-agentic LLM call. It is in this first step where your agent can do anything, from on-brand copy editing to beginning to govern the entire generative publishing process that your system is producing. So the important thing to understand is that this single node can represent basically an entire chatflow agent. And using chatflow connector tools, entire subagentic processes and other flows from your server can be triggered here. And all of this happens before we hit the next node. So that is one of the big things to understand, is that we're now able to run large operations that are bundled inside of single nodes that flow left to right, like inside of N8N or Make. And this is basically what is known as visual agentic orchestration, where multiple entities, human and AI, and sometimes lots of utilities and maybe raw resources that are bootstrapped and networked. And all of that can then collectively push forward the business logic of whatever it is that you're working, rather than just having simple agent-to-human chat exchanges sent back and forth. Okay, next we have the human input node, and this is where FlowGraph, Agentflow, shines. We can now pause the flow for human review, letting a human moderator evaluate the response and decide whether to accept or reject the material that has been created in previous steps. And, since enterprise and professional AI is now seeing such a big push for compliance and general safety in all these non-human automated communications, new features like this in Flowise are absolutely awesome. So qualifying agentic work is getting much more flexible. We can hand things off to additional agent node that uses native Flowise and custom tools to perform a specialized set of tasks for final drafting, formatting, production, and publishing. And then using the Slack MCP node, we push to our Slack, but the announcement can be published to whichever communication and messenger platforms you're able to connect. So finally, we then attach the basic direct reply nodes to close the loop and notify user of successful completion of the agentic sequence. But if the post is rejected, we will route the output to a sequential thinking node, which uses chain of thought reasoning to analyze the rejection and suggest improvements. And this will then feed into another agent who will draft one more version and allow us to deliver that iterative human-guided improvement cycle that will soon be employed in most AI systems. So this architecture, the start, the LLM rewrite, the human in the loop, the dynamic tool agents, and the Slack MCP server will demonstrate just some of the amazing capabilities that Flowise FlowGraph, otherwise known as Agentflow V2, is enabling us with. And from personal experience now using this new architecture, it's no longer just about endless cables. We can now start building adaptive, trustworthy systems where humans and agents collaborate seamlessly, rather than sitting on opposite sides of a chat window. And thanks to Flowise's open source no-code canvas, you can build, test, and scale these puppies very, very fast. All right, let's get started. So we have the start node. Let's save up our flow. Okay, next, let's bring in an LLM node. We'll rename the start node to something more helpful. We'll use chat input as our mode for the input type. Now you see how our other node gets eaten by this massive expansion of the start node, but that's okay. We can just find the other node right under it. So that's an interesting thing within the new architectures. When we rename our nodes, they become massive. Let's also give a more helpful name to our LLM node. We'll use OpenAI and dial in our settings. Personally, I'm working exclusively now with the 4.1 line, using all the variants, and here for now we will just use the 4.1 flagship frontier. We will set the reasoning effort to high. Let's give this a quick system prompt. We will set our memory type to utilize the all messages option. The next node that we will set up is our human input node. Connect them up. And let's give a more descriptive name to this human input node as well. Our description type will be dynamic because we want to utilize a model to do this. We will again utilize OpenAI. Set up whatever models you want to use here. And we will bring down the temperature to 0.5 to follow a more deterministic model thinking approach. Okay, then let's set up a little prompt here. And we will enable feedback as well. Okay, next node, an agent node with an adorable new little icon. 2 of them. Slap them on the canvas. You already know the drill. Let's then slug up our inputs. Connecting the proceed and reject paths to different agents, as we now want to create some branching happening within our agentic FlowGraph flow. And just a quick reroute, we will add a tool node right before the agent node on the rejection path. So the signal flow stays that whatever the LLM proceeds with, whatever happens with the model in the human input node, then gets passed directly to the agent on the approve path. But on the reject path, first we hit a tool call, and then we hit the agent. And now let's drag one more tool call for the Slack MCP server and the direct reply nodes, which will be used to complete this loop. Okay, going to add some notes here to help us stay tidy. Something like user review. And this is a sticky note for the human input node. Okay, now moving up to our upper branch. Okay, let's work on our first agent. This agent will be responsible for the approved path if the user accepts and proceeds. So we'll give it a more descriptive name. Select our model, which in our case is still OpenAI. Let's define the developer prompt. And you will find this prompt in the resource pack. And also it will come in the template itself. And here we will also pass in user data. So that this agent can have awareness and context directly from the user message as well. We don't have to do this, and this will be passed down from the inside of the flow. But in my case, I did want to dynamically set and pass in the question parameter. And now let's go ahead and dial in all of our tools. Let's add some RAG functionality to our setup here. So we'll be simply calling an index through a Flowise managed document store. We will also go ahead and provision another memory store which contains a different type of data. And this, of course, will be completely unique and different in your use case, so you may not need any storage to be queried here, but you certainly can, especially now that we have this streamlined and easier to operate toolkit development console of sorts. Everything flows nicely from top to bottom, and we don't have to constantly be drowning inside of endless cable canvas spaghetti oceans. I will say that I'm starting to miss my time in those spaghetti oceans, but that is just a personal problem. I don't think any of us will truly miss the dozens or hundreds of cables that we used to have to do to make something happen. Now we just fill out one long form, one incredibly long form. I don't know what's better, but I guess we'll figure it out. Okay. Once we finish up our agent node, we see how it also changes shapes and expands. So now we can do our MCP Slack server tool. Drag out Slack MCP, set up your credential, and for the action to use here, we will just go with post message. We will set up two arguments to be passed in, and these come with the Slack server. We have the channel ID, and then we also have the text arg. And that we set to a dynamic value, and we're going to pass in an output from a previous node. As you see, we have options here. So let's go ahead and set the output of the agent that wrote the final copy as our value to be sent into Slack. Slap a couple of more sticky notes on this canvas to help us stay organized. Okay, let's rename this direct reply node to reflect that it is on the acceptance path and we can respond to the user. And here we will add a hard-coded message or a line. And then directly below that, we can dynamically reference some of the previous content. So in this case, let's pull out Agentflow output and set it as the value that will be displayed to the user. And now going to tool up the rejection path agent. Now let's go ahead and set up a sequential thinking MCP server. And this node will help us do some additional reasoning. We will select the only action that is available. Okay, as we love to do, let's move around some nodes, patch up some cables, and we're almost done with the core setup. Going to change the name to reflect the path that we're on. Let's also go ahead and define what we will be outputting to the user in the direct reply node of the rejection path. So here again, we can add a top-level statement that's a hard-coded type of thing that we don't even have to put there. But if we want to create this kind of agentic assignment experience, then we can do what we do in N8N and set a lot of things. Some are dynamic, some are hard-coded, or additional prompt values. So here we'll select Agentflow again and put it there. Can't get enough of these sticky notes. Much nicer in this new canvas though, because the previous sticky notes with dark mode were completely unusable. In fact, it ruined an entire tutorial for me just recently. Or a segment of that tutorial, because the text in those yellow stickies and dark mode, it just doesn't go together. But now we can actually see what everything is and what it does. Incredible. Okay, let's qualify our technical stuff by running the checklist. Looks like we are all good. And that completes our entire sequence here. So now let's go ahead and start testing this unit and see how well it works. I'm going to bring in a prompt. All right, let's send it in. There we go. We hit our first path. We have an option to select a choice, make a choice. We'll provide feedback. And there's our response. We see that no additional work needed to be done. We can expand our process flow viewer and take a look at all the cool stuff that our agents did. And then we can take a look whether Slack indeed received a message. And yes, we do see that post being sent in. Let's go ahead and send in one more request, and this time we will try the rejection path. I believe that is not a path that anyone truly wants to be on, but unfortunately we do need to have it inside of conditionally charged agentics. Thank you for watching. I hope this helps you on your Agentflow V2 familiarization journey, and consider joining the Vault or my academy to learn more about applied AI engineering.